Okay, guys, I'm just sharing a screen.
Excuse
me. Okay, I think we are about to go live. It's just loading on. Can you check? Yes, we are on YouTube now. Can you click? Mute. Okay. Okay. Just a second. I will be there. We start in less than a minute, guys.
It's a good thing you're not paying us. Otherwise, it would have ended up being very expensive for you.
Okay, let's start. How come I am not visible? Guys, can you see my screen? No. My face, at least. Am I visible? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just a second. Let me just check one final thing. Right. Okay. Fine. Okay. Welcome to Supply Chain Talks. This is our webinar today, our first live webinar on the Supply Chain Talks platform. The topic of the webinar today is basically future of supply chains post-COVID-19. This is definitely a vast topic that based on this pandemic, a lot of dynamics in and the environment in which we are operating our supply chain have changed. The importance of supply chain was highly, highlighted. So based on this, this seminar has been, this webinar has been arranged. And in this webinar today, I am joined by three esteemed guests. My first expert is he is the CFO for Supplier. Yusuf Musmar. He is joining us from Saudi Arabia. He has a long experience in the field of supply chain, and he had been extremely, or he has been vastly attached to one of the biggest distribution companies in Saudi Arabia, which is Farooq Tamar. And last but not the least, Sayyid Abul Kazmi. He is joining us from Pakistan. He is the director supply chain for Pakistan, for Pepsi Pakistan Beverages. So thank you all for joining this webinar. And I would like all of you to also give a brief detail, not brief, but a detailed introduction about your experience and who you are to our listeners. So please, I will start off with Toby.
Yeah, hey, welcome everybody. I don't know whether you heard before, because at my end, Noman sounded a bit like a robot when he was introducing myself. So my name is Toby Meyer. I'm the CEO of Saludo in Middle East and Africa, and I'm also the CFO of our DHL Global Forwarding business across Middle East and Africa. I'm Swabian. I'm come from a small village close to Stuttgart. It's a village where most of the football fans will know Jürgen Klopp. He used to play football when he was young, before he became a very good coach in Liverpool. Everybody in my village actually is going and working for Mercedes-Benz, because they have a very big factory close by, where they produce all the S-Class and E-Class, which are then sold to Saudi Arabia and to UAE and all the other fancy places. Yet I ended up working for Deutsche Post DHL. After studying, I worked a bit in Switzerland for Kraft Foods, Mondelez today, so a big chocolate and coffee brand. Yeah, then I moved for private reasons to Germany, started 12 years ago at Deutsche Post DHL. I worked in the Deutsche Post business, I worked in the supply chain business, and since 5 years I'm in the forwarding business. I've worked in Zurich, I've worked in Bonn, I've worked in London, I've worked and lived in Johannesburg, and since 4 years I'm now in Dubai. So I'm really looking forward to an inspiring discussion. Thanks, Noman, for inviting me, and over, I guess, to the next esteemed colleague.
I would like, thank you, Toby, for the introduction, and Yusuf, if you may, please.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. My name is Yusuf Musmar. I hold a degree in accounting from the University of Jordan. I hold around 22 years of experience, starting off with accounting and audit, moving into logistics and operation, and finally holding regional positions in complex supply chain management. I have hands-on experience in multiple business sectors, starting with computers and computer parts with IBM, construction chemicals with Master Builders, FMCG and beauty products with L'Oreal, and then moving on into food manufacturing and healthcare distribution in Saudi Arabia, as my last position in Saudi was as a Chief Supply Chain Officer with Namarig Group. It's quite a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you for the intro. Abul, if you may please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where people are joining us from. First of all, thank you, Noman, for arranging this discussion. Glad to be here. I guess I'll start with my name, which is pretty long. I don't know if you have the time for it, but Sayyid Muhammad Abul Hasan Kazmi. You can call me, whatever you want to. So I'm a mechanical engineer by background. I was born in Pakistan, but I've spent a lot of time outside Pakistan. I grew up on a small island in Africa, Seychelles. It's somewhere in the Indian Ocean, and I did my engineering in Pakistan. That's where I know Noman from. The first couple of years were in the chemical industry, but then I joined PepsiCo. It's been almost 15 years with PepsiCo. I've worked in multiple geographies. I worked in UAE, I worked in Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, spent a couple of years in Saudi, and then for the last 5 years, I'm based in Pakistan. I've done multiple roles across supply chain. I've done performance roles, productivity roles, quality roles, plant management roles, and currently I'm the director of supply chain for beverages in Pakistan.
Thank you, Abul. Thank you. I'm feeling honored to have all three of you in this webinar. And now moving forward with the webinar, I would first, before we go into the questions and before we start the discussion, I just want to have a feel of how has been your experience as a person during the last 4 months during this COVID with the lockdowns and everything. So if you can share just briefly about your own experience, personal and a little bit on the professional side. So Toby, if you may, please.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a special time. I have to be honest. Whilst I always welcomed and have flexibility for my people, I was always one of these people having 4 kids who like to work from the office because at home there's no chance to get it done. And guess what? I was also very happy and surprised to spend a lot of time with the family, day and night, and it worked pretty well. I think for me personally, and I mean, being part of one of the biggest logistics companies anyway, it was a demanding time, but it was also a very motivating time because we really could help a lot of people. We helped, really bringing badly needed PPE and medical medicines to countries, especially in our region, in need, and that really gives a lot of more purpose to your job than just moving I don't know, cars from A to B or some new smartphones from A to B, because it was really important. And so it was a busy time. It was a time with a lot of communication. I think we all didn't hear about Zoom until last Christmas, and now we are all Zoom experts. But yeah, it really showed what is possible working from home. It really brought even my team, which is 8, 9, 10 flight hours away, very close together. And I think looking back, we are pretty happy how we managed it. And I mean, as I mentioned before, there is a small improvement. So my family is in Germany. I just joined them last week, so there was some travel possible. But I think it will be still a long way until we are back to the days and all the travels and all the stuff we used to have in the past, if it ever comes back to the similar levels.
No, I agree with you. I am waiting for the day where I can, without any tension or hesitation, I can shake the next person's hand.
100%.
So exactly. So Abul, if you can, how have your 4 months been like?
Yeah. So, on the personal end, because, we didn't have to travel, whether it was locally or globally. So there was a lot of time that was freed up, and working from home, it's been a pleasurable experience because we're closer to the family for a lot of time. So getting to know the kids a bit more than we did during our normal pre-COVID times, that has been a great experience personally. From a professional perspective, I think one of the things that has happened is, we've also got a very strong sense of belonging, whether it's organizations or as a country or as a community, how everyone has got together and we care about each other much more. And thinking about how do we, whether it's from an organization perspective or from a community perspective, what can we do for the community? So that sense of belonging to your organization, to your country, to, is much stronger because we're fighting this cause. From a purely work perspective, I think, I'm not going to talk about, how we've embraced digital and all of that. We'll have ample time to talk about it, but it's just been up and down. So initially, we were getting used to, technology and how do we work from home. Once we got used to it, we realized there's a lot of efficiency that's been brought in. And then that boundary between work and home has just disappeared because physically you're in the house, you're working, and now we're much more engrossed and that boundaries just disappeared. So I think now there's an opportunity just to redraw that boundary and step back a bit so that we're all continue to operate in a healthy way. But so far a great experience, I think, from a community, from a personal, from a work perspective. It's been great.
So true, so true. Thanks, Abul. Yusuf, your experience so far?
Well, my last post with Tamer Group ended at the end of March. So while I was one of these people who took a back seat and tried to understand what was going around without being under the pressure of an urgent operation. And I felt that gave me a lot of advantage. I was able to connect through my international network to a lot of situations. I was able to get involved in a lot of discussions with a lot of professionals in Europe and North America, and as well as this region. And I was also able to provide some advisory services to a couple of connections that required them. And as you know, right now, I am focused on relocating my life as I'm ending my presence physically here in Saudi, moving on to a new chapter of my life. I do live alone, so this time I was able to connect with my dog quite well, and that's been quite a rewarding experience, believe it or not. Thank you.
Good. No, I think everybody in their own account had a positive experience out of COVID. They were able to connect with their families and reassess their priorities. For me as well, that this platform that we are now interacting on, the supply chain talks, basically it's the product of COVID-19 for me as well. Having a lot of time for myself. I wanted to be more productive and to be in the form of giving back to the society after so many years in the supply chain. So I basically took on that I should start, tutorials, how I can give back, small topics, talk about supply chain. And one thing led to the other. I did another webinar earlier on the VAT, and now today, mashallah, we are sitting here doing this webinar. A little quick numbers I would like to run by you and all the people who have joined us on YouTube. That being the first live webinar for supply chain talks, we had over 200 registrations. And from a demographic point of view, the registrations spanned 21 countries. So they were from Canada up to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, down to even Nigeria and South Africa. So demographically, it's a widespread of people who registered for this session, and overall around 152 organizations, people from 152 organizations, they registered for that. So I thank you for all the people who had shown some confidence and have registered for this session, and we hope that now coming to the main topics, it will be a very fruitful one, the discussion. So my first question to our esteemed panel is that linking to your own experience, that the question is that we have seen in the last few months the acceptance of work from home across the globe. The question is that, is this the new norm? How will the organization structure change with this experience? And what would you recommend looking at this? So I would put the question to start off with Yusuf.
Thank you. Thank you, Noman. You're doing a great job. We're happy to be here and support. Thank you.
My pleasure, man.
So back to the question. I've been quite an advocate for workforce agility ever since technology made it possible. Personally, as a professional, some of my most creative moments were when I was able to temporarily isolate myself from the office environment and the noise that comes with it, and place myself in surroundings that enhanced my creative thinking. Today, work from home almost replaced the term of workforce agility in the minds of people, but not only behind how many times we've heard it being mentioned in official statements and media reports, but also in consideration of personal safety during the reign of this pandemic. So home today is the safest place for all of us to be. But the way I see it is in the not so far future, the workforce will start demanding more choices to improve their agility beyond being at home. In my opinion, organizations should capitalize on that and institutionalize workforce agility within their structures. Of course, jobs will need to be reprofiled, employee performance management has to be re-engineered, and of course, you need to continuously bring improvements into the technology and the environment that would support workforce agility. For example, collaboration tools and dashboarding tools. And no doubt organizations will benefit from the reduction of real estate costs, administrative costs, as well as some employee benefit costs, while maintaining performance and output to an acceptable measure. But if you really look at it in a bigger scale, the ultimate application of workforce agility would only materialize once organizations can tap into a more regional or a global workforce without any restriction. But of course, that can only be possible by international or regional agreements and legislation.
Thank you for your input, Yusuf. Agree that, yes, a lot of companies had been advocating work from home concept, as you said, the workforce agility, and a lot of companies have defined that the, one desk for two employees kind of a concept has been there for long, but COVID basically showed everyone that how easily it can be adapted and how easily it can be, transform your current structure to the work from home structure as well. So, Toby, your point of view, you are from the logistics background, you're from a logistics company. How do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I think for the younger generation, I think that's really a no-brainer. And I think it's something for them, thinking of when I started my career 20 years ago, everybody goes to an office at 8 o'clock in the morning and leaves at 5 or 6. I don't think that's a very compelling proposition for young professionals to start a career. So I think there is a generational point of view that it will naturally become much more demanded by the workers to have flexibility. People like myself who are in regional roles or in global roles, I think they always had the privilege because we were traveling a lot and we were getting the job done from a hotel desk, from a bar, from the airport, from within the plane. So to a certain extent, we always had this setup of working wherever is needed. I myself worked in roles where I never really had an own desk, and I had, in London downtown, I was squeezing in between two tables, and I had all the calls walking through the park. So I was always flexible, and I really welcome that. There will be people, perhaps, who have small kids who really prefer to be in an office, and if somebody prefers to be in an office to be productive, I think the company will be wise to offer that opportunity. If somebody prefers to organize himself in a different way, I'm pretty sure it will be wise to allow it. There should be a certain level of, some certain days in a month, in a week, whatever the rule will be, where people get together to create some form of social bonding. Because one of the things, in COVID, we all benefited from the relationships we had established pre-COVID. So if we just had virtual working, there would not be a foundation. So I think there must be a certain balance of keeping a foundation, of connecting the people, bringing them together, whether that's in an office or whether that is in a resort or whether that's in at an event, but people need the chance to really get to know each other. But if they know each other, then I think the job can get done in Karachi, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, it doesn't matter. And if you think about it, we have what we call best shoring. A lot of simple jobs have moved in the last 20 years from, say, Europe to India. And actually, we are moving to the next level. It's not like best shoring whole departments. It's about every individual can pretty much choose where the job gets done. For those privileged jobs, I would say, working in office environments, who can operate like this. Because don't forget, we have a lot of couriers, we have a lot of pilots. If you're a pilot, home office doesn't work, right? That's clear. But for those people who have jobs in administrative management roles, etc., I believe we will see a huge range of things. There will not be a right and wrong. There will not be a one size fits it all. And I think it will, in the end, become much more enjoyable for the people because you can choose when you do the work. I'm not an early bird. I don't like working at 7 o'clock. My boss is very good in that. But I'm much better at 6 or 8 or 10 o'clock in the evening where he prefers to do something else. And I think that flexibility will just make everybody more productive, more happy. And in the end, it will be a much more attractive and much better working world for everybody. That's my take on it.
How true. Toby, agree with you. Like I can give an example of myself as well that I'd taken up, I stepped into the consultancy gig some time back, and because of COVID, I was fortunate enough to provide consultancy to an organization which is based in Khobar while I'm sitting in Jeddah. So everything can be easily done online. You just need to meet the key people, everything online, everything is available. So previously this was possibly not possible probably, but now everybody has seen it that how easily it can be done. And it has open a lot of new opportunities for everyone as well. Continuing with this, Abul, your views.
Yeah, no, some great points made by Mr. Toby and Mr. Yusuf. Now, I think if you look at the workplace trends over the last couple of years, you might recall, we were told offices are not good, move to, open space, and that's better for collaboration. And now we're looking at where people are physically very distant, but digitally connected, and yet collaboration, what we're being told is much better, right? Now, any trend to exist for a bit longer or be adapted, it has to have an overall positive experience for all stakeholders, right? So for organizations, it has to be, more productivity or financial benefit or anything. And even from an employee's perspective, it has to have a positive experience. I think Toby mentioned it, and while it's been a very different personal experience for people who've had access to bigger houses or bigger space, better utilities, better internet connection, they've had a positive experience. People where they don't have that luxury. Smaller spaces, they're sharing spaces, internet connectivity is an issue. They haven't had that positive an experience. Now, at the same time, you're seeing that organizations are flexing their policies where they're now paying for internet connections at home, where they're giving furniture allowances, where they're giving all these allowances. Now, for work from home to become bigger than it was before COVID, I think COVID will have to extend a bit, so that people get used to it and really start understanding the benefits, and it's overall a more positive experience for everyone. But we're now seeing that lockdowns are easing out, and from next month onwards, a lot of countries are opening up offices and schools. Now, if that happens, I don't think work from home will be any bigger than it was before. It might be just a small increase. But if COVID does extend and everyone's able to see the benefits, then yes, it will become much bigger. However, there's another thing that organizations have realized, that we don't need people in one building, in one space to get the job done. Now, outsourcing, or I think Toby used another word, has become something which will be adapted at a much bigger scale. Organizations will look at, what is my core function? What do I need to do myself? And what are things that the organization does not need to do? We can outsource, right? So my take on this is, if COVID extends and it's an overall positive experience, work from home will get bigger. If not, if in a month or 2 months everyone's back at work, the overall positive experience isn't that great. People like me, or we already had that flexibility of working from home a bit. So yeah, it's now much more extended, but we still had an idea of it. So that's my take on this.
Sorry, I think now my mic is unmuted. Thank you, Abul, for your input. Before we move forward, I just want to make a few comments for our viewers who have logged in onto the YouTube channel. The panel will be answering any questions that our esteemed viewers have. All you need to do is, in the YouTube chat box, you need to just put in your question, which should be relevant to the topic, and put in your full name, your organization and country, so that we are aware demographically where the question is coming from. So, and all the questions, hopefully we'll try to answer them at the end of the session. Thank you. Okay, taking from what you have said, Abul, on the lockdowns now ending across the world, the flights have initiated, they have started, and but based on during the COVID, the lockdowns, we saw that everything kind of went online, all transactions, engagements, everything, they went online. So how, and that included the interaction with our suppliers as well, with our vendors and partners as well. So how do you think that it will impact our negotiations with suppliers and clients alike? Further, how important will the supplier relationship will be moving on, like how it can be coped with an online engagement? So I would put this question to Toby, please. Toby, if you can.
Yeah, I think, as like the same subject as with employees, I think in terms of engagement with suppliers or carriers or other parties, we'll see much more integration. I think a big buzzword out there is APIs. So, when I started my career, building an interface was a project where we hired management consultants. It took half a year. I don't know. It was really complicated stuff. And after it was working, nobody ever wanted to touch the interface again because it was a big black box. And I think I see Youssef smiling. I think we all
absolutely
have that kind of SIP R3 project and what have you, right? So today an API takes you a day, a 2, a week max, and you can integrate very easily between all kind of different systems and platforms. So I think this whole integration will become much more natural. And let's face it, we have a policy where we don't allow external visitors to come to our offices for safety reasons. So the only way we have to engage is via email, via Zoom, via calls. And for me, it's the same thing, right? So it will be using technology, leveraging technology, closer integrating systems, and working together. And at the end of the day, it will make the whole ecosystem more efficient if you have much more technology using and connecting all the dots. And if you think of logistics, Whilst we are a big company, we are still in the big scheme of logistics. We are a tiny player because the whole logistics space and the assets, you're talking trillions of dollars, is such a huge space, and it's all about connecting the dots and all the different players and hundreds of thousands of companies being engaged with millions of companies moving cargo from A to B. So I think technology will be a key enabler, really driving efficiency, driving productivity, and we will use the same tools like we use with employees to build relationships and engage. I think you're on mute, Norman.
Yeah, I always forget that I have muted my mic. Thank you, Toby, for your input. I would now pass the torch for the answering to the same question to Abul.
Yeah, so I think I totally agree with Toby that you know, it was amazing on how quickly customers and suppliers, you know, adapted to technology, right? Whether Google Meet or Zoom, you know, over a couple of days, everyone knew how to use it, and you were, you know, interacting digitally with them. I think now moving on, a couple of things that will become important is during COVID, we've also realized that any disruptions on impact of disruptions across the value chain on your part of the business, and the having real-time data on which of my suppliers are up and running, which of them have been impacted by a localized COVID restriction, which of my customers are up and running, where can I get the product out there. So that real-time data across the value chain became extremely important, so that you would know what to produce, what not to produce, what raw material is going to be available, what's not going to be available. So the importance of that data across the value chain was just so important during COVID. So what we've realized is that we have to work together, and there will be, there'll be more and more connectivity across the value chain. I wouldn't be surprised if organizations also start thinking about going upward, on what value is there if we start doing a bit more than what we do. So looking up the value chain, because these disruptions have also made people realize that the more we can control from a business continuity perspective, it's better. Now, there are pros and cons to it, so it's not such an easy subject. But so in summary, that supplier relationship management has become extremely critical, especially as we move out of COVID, and organizations will be looking at recouping that revenue, that lost revenue. Suppliers will also have to invest from an innovation perspective, from a productivity perspective, from a capacity perspective, right? So making sure that we're all synced in, we're working together, and adapting, showing agility is extremely important. So that relationship will become extremely, extremely important as we move forward.
Thank you, Abul, for your input. Agree with you. Yes, the organizations would, on the point that, trying to again recoup or trying to get back the losses, and they have to make it worth the while. And the suppliers and partners, they have to play a key role that, everybody made a loss, and everybody has to stand shoulder to shoulder, act as true partners, and take the hit. It cannot be that I make all the money and the other person has to take all the hits. So it has to be, a win-win situation for all in that regard. So thank you. So, Yusuf, your take on the topic, on the subject now.
Well, just simply to add on what the gentleman said, today a lot of businesses have decided to diversify their sources of supply as a method for applying risk mitigation against the potential occurrence of events such as the current. So now what you're doing is you're increasing the number of your suppliers, and you want to maintain strategic relationships with the suppliers. And at the same time, you will be running a much more transactions, as you have to connect to more than one potential source per SKU within even your transactional environment. So these technologies that are today available that get you to video conference your supplier in a minute, and I believe there will continue to be very, very instrumental in maintaining your supplier relationship management system altogether. Yeah.
You're still mute, Noman.
The same thing.
You're testing our ability to lip read you. My friend, that's not going to happen.
Sorry. Okay, moving on with the same question of the everything going online. The other thing that we also saw that on the supply side of the businesses, a lot of work was done, or companies tried to react quickly to the COVID by coming onto the e-commerce platform. A lot of restaurants, a lot of shops, a lot of people, they jump onto the bandwagon of e-commerce, introduce their apps, or they try to log into the big delivery companies like Uber, Careem, and these people. Moving forward, how do you see that? Will these e-commerce trends, the importance of these trends, hold on after the lockdowns ends and everything goes back to normal? Like right now, we are moving slowly to the normalization. And with this view, how should supply chains prepare for this? So I would put this question to our friend Abu.
Yeah. So on this one, everyone since COVID, because you're confined to your house, and you're trying to maintain social distance. Now everyone's been experimenting on the net on where can I buy stuff, and so the traffic or the number of people that have started experiencing an online purchase has gone dramatically up, which has given them the ability to pilot it. So those apprehensions around, will I get the right quality? Will it be delivered on time? If I pay in advance, so they've kind of realized or had an overall positive experience, due to COVID from an e-commerce perspective. So I think the other thing that has happened is a lot of smaller players got the advantage due to COVID that they have visibility in front of the consumer. So these private labels also got access to people. So these trends will certainly hold because everyone has had a positive experience. But what will happen is, because people have experimented a lot, the consumer now knows that he can get convenience. He knows that he can demand, a cost advantage or better deals. So the consumer will become very, very choosy. So organizations will have to now, instead of taking a macro view on demand, will have to take a micro view or micro segmentation from a consumer perspective. You'll have to be very close as we move out of COVID on what is the consumer, how does he want to consume the product, what way, in what format, at what cost, at what convenience. So you'll have to stay very close to it. The other thing, it'll become very competitive because with consumer experimenting with a lot of private labels, because they're sitting home, right? They just go on the net and they find something, they order it. The categories will become much more competitive. Bigger organizations will have to make sure that they continue to offer value and that customization that consumers are demanding. And that value is going to be extremely. So if I'm also a consumer, we have spoiled the consumer a bit, during COVID, and we'll have to live with it for some time. So that's the biggest challenge, from a supply chain perspective.
Correct. Thank you, Abul. Yusuf, I would pass on the torch for the question to you now.
Thank you. Well, I agree the trends will sustain, will rise for sure. The variety of product of services that are available today through e-com channels will also continue to grow. Online psychotherapy, for example, today is quite a thriving model for a fitting example. But when businesses decide to, if they haven't already started their ventures with e-commerce and they decided that they want to start up now in response to what is happening, kind of a ride the wave approach, they have to understand that there are considerable changes that will need to be made to their business model. And that the infrastructural adjustments that need to be put in place for the business to be able to cope with such a transformation might be a little bit too expensive. The advice that I give them is to try to seek alliances today with companies that offer the most challenging part of e-com, which is the last mile delivery. and try to work with their suppliers on long-term alliances that deliver value both ways, customer service from one end and value related to the business's contribution into the entire buildup of the scale of economy for the last mile delivery that the outsourced provider is using. And that's how you can get businesses to ride the wave with a win-win situation without the need to go through a very long process of re-engineering their business model.
Correct. Thank you, Yusuf. Toby, if you may, please.
Yeah, I think, and sorry, Abul, to say, but on the working from home, I'm more quite positive that it will not go back, even if COVID is over. I think that the big case, at least what I see in my environment, is that people always doubted it can work. They have been proven wrong, and with that proven wrong, it will continue. And I think e-commerce is a similar story. So many people saw the benefit as a consumer of e-commerce, but they didn't make the step, especially older generation, for example. Now they have tried it out, and hey, guess what? It was an amazing consumer experience. And to get them back into, go into a car, drive 15 minutes to a mall, go into the shop, find it in a shelf, put it in your wagon, queue at the cashier, put it back in your car, versus just, you know, press a button. That will be challenging in my point of view. So I think e-commerce is there, and it will just accelerate. It will just continue. It's very interesting. It's different levels, I would say. If you look at Europe, it's a very open. I think you have UK market is very advanced already. Germany, still skeptical people or certain areas. I mean, Amazon started with the books 20 years ago. It's good, but groceries, people still go to supermarkets. In Dubai, where I live, you can even order your fuel. So there's a fuel car driving around. I mean, my wife is pretty spoiled there, right? But if you think ahead of what is coming, Internet of Things, you know, you will have fridges who will measure how much milk you have. And that fridge will place your e-commerce order on your behalf if the milk is empty. They will order your new yogurts, your bananas, whatever. So I think the e-commerce is really only just getting started. I know it's big already, but I think we see a small proportion of what is there to come. To be brutally honest, you know, if I would be invested heavily in real estate for offices or shopping malls, that's where I would start wondering about alternative use cases and what can I do, because I really don't see that we will go back to the 1890s where the big malls and everything get together. I think that is really a new trend of e-commerce, and to be honest, I think we all have seen it. I'm fully agree with Abdul. We all have been spoiled, and you know, it's hard to convince people to go back to a much more hassle for achieving the same. And the time of your life is gone, and you know, for the companies, it's also cheaper. They don't have to pay for the rent. They don't have to pay for the service people in the stores. There is some extra cost for logistics, especially the returns. And that, for example, if you look at Africa, is a big challenge, because in Africa, if you make a delivery to Nigeria and then it's the wrong part or the wrong size, getting it back into another country is often a challenge. So there's many border limitation, customs clearance. So I think there's a lot of regulation and simplification needed to really make it happen to the same extent in Africa compared to what we see in Middle East today or in Europe today. But I'm fully convinced it will come, and it will be a good thing. And it will also be a big opportunity for every entrepreneur out there. You know, if you are an entrepreneur in, I don't know, Abidjan in Ivory Coast, your market was Abidjan, finished. Yep. In the future, your market is the world. You know, Youssef sees something in online. He really thinks that dress is fantastic. He met an amazing woman. He wants to make a present. He can go and order it, and he'll have it the next day or in 2 days. So
how did you know?
Yeah. But there's the opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of people, and I think especially in emerging markets, people will have access to, you know, directly engage with markets where people have also more available income, and a lot of the middlemen in between the layers will be cut out over time. So I think it's a good thing. I think it will change the world tremendously in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think it's really going to be a really good thing for many, many people in many territories.
Thank you, Toby. Now, from what I heard on this question from all three of you, three things came out which I liked. From Abul, the word choosy, that we have made our consumers very choosy. Yusuf talked about the last mile. And Toby, you mentioned about the automation, or how would I put it? I think Abul just went offline. So we will continue, let him come back. And also, Toby, you mentioned that we have spoiled our consumers as well.
Yeah.
So
I was talking about the Internet of Things, I think was the automation.
Exactly. So the ease of availability is there. So from that perspective, I would like to bring it from a very key topic of every company is the inventory that they're holding, or the SKUs. That does this represent, again, the COVID has provided an opportunity for companies to relook at their inventory, to either go into simplification or reduce their offering to the customers, or it given them an opportunity, as you mentioned, the entrepreneurship, that a person has now a global impact, or global market is available to basically present a much more customized offering to increase the SKUs. So how would this affect the inventory or the SKU holding of or the offering that the companies or organization will give to their consumers? So let's start off again with you, Yusuf, please, if you can.
Thank you. Well, see the bigger problem here is that demand globally has been disrupted. So everything you knew about your inventory in terms of where you wanted to sell it, what you wanted to sell it for, how long it was supposed to last you, how long it takes to replenish, and whatever, everything is just no longer valid. Of course, SKU rationalization is something that is definitely organizations are encouraged to look into seriously, if not already part of their ongoing procedures. But at the end of the day, today, for your inventory to be able to serve you well, what you need to do is to be very careful with sensing your demand. You need to understand what product today you can offer into the demand that is evident today into the market. And believe it or not, no matter how sure you are of what you think is in demand today, the world will have a different view tomorrow. So you also want to be able to have that backed up with a system of quick logistics to be able to capitalize on the demand gap that you identify and be able to fulfill with product. As far as your current inventory is concerned, as an organization, what you would need to do is probably hold on any further purchases if your demand has been significantly disrupted, and try to work closely with your customers and try to understand the continuity of this disruption, on whether the demand patterns can pick up or not, what needs to happen for such demand to pick up and the inventory goes back into its normal service runs.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you. Toby, your input, please.
Yeah, I think from a pure SKU point of view, I think now managing more SKUs with more technology, I think is becoming easier. So I think whereas the benefits in the past have been bigger, I think that benefit is somehow reducing. And I think diversification, in the demand side, like Yusuf said, the key is what is the demand of my customers, of my consumers. And consumers in general tend to like, individualized items. They want their own T-shirt. They want their own, I've got my own, case for the phone, right? I want to have my iPhone with my personal signature if I can. So there will be a lot of these individualizations, and I think people will demand it. So if anything, along the e-commerce boom and along the whole technology capabilities, you have 3D printing, for example, which will continue to evolve. I personally believe we will just see more and more and more, to be honest. I hardly doubt it will become much less and simplified. In terms of inventories and inventory holdings, there will for sure be a review. I think many organizations are checking, and I think Abdul mentioned it also before already, to see how if a COVID comes, if another disruption happens, how are we prepared, and where do we have warehouses and stocks strategically so we can, be flexible and respond to any form of disruption, whether it's an earthquake. I think we all have seen the horrible pictures from Beirut this week. If such things happen, what can you do to get your factory back going, to get your product in the shelf, to get your product to your end consumers? So there will be stock holdings, more warehousing, more inventories hold in Europe, for example. I think it's also a big opportunity actually for the Middle East and Africa region, because it's in between Far East and Europe. So I think it's much closer to the consumer market. So if you think of North Africa, you can put any inventory in a ship, and it can be trucked to any place in Europe within a couple of days. Versus if you have some urgently required PPE somewhere in Shanghai, it takes you much longer to get it to Europe. So I think there will be a lot of rethinking happening, resilience, these kind of buzzwords, SKU simplification. I would personally be surprised if it would be a key theme for people, because the consumer demand will be dictating that.
Thank you, Toby. Abul, welcome back. We lost you for a moment.
If you just summarize the question, my apologies for that.
No worries. We are basically talking on the inventory topic, that with now our consumer being choosy, and we have kind of spoiled them with the options available during the COVID lockdowns. So from that point of view, does this represent an opportunity for organizations to either relook at their inventory holding or the number of SKUs that they offer to the consumer? Would they go for simplification, that is reduction, or would they cater to the new demand or to the new choosy and spoiled consumer by increasing their offerings? And how would that impact their own inventory holding topics?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, if you look at, let's look at what was happening during COVID. In the initial days when, the lockdowns were a bit strict and we had to ensure social distancing, whether manufacturing facilities or warehousing facilities, the process had slowed down a bit because, you just wanted to make sure where in manufacturing and warehousing where automation wasn't that big. So as the manufacturing processes slowed down, so organizations had to really think hard on what SKUs do we need to focus on, which we need to get out there, which are in demand, because my output has been impacted because of these lockdowns up and down and within the value chain. So what we've seen so far, and it does vary from industry to industry, so there's no generic answer to it. But what we saw was some rationalization effort driven by the impact of the lockdown. However, from a consumer perspective, because the consumer is experiencing a lot more. There's a lot of options. He's out there on the internet, on his mobile phone, looking at all the options available. So they are getting more and more choosy about what they want to wear, consume, whatever the stuff is. And they're also cost conscious on because with the economy suffering, a lot of organizations even laying off people or not giving full benefits. People are also a little cost conscious, and so they're looking at cost also. From a sustainability or from a community perspective, people are also seeing the benefits of a cleaner environment with less activity going on. So there are certain trends that will stick on to the consumer, which are cost consciousness, customization, sustainability, or the impact to the community. Now, all of these drivers would force organizations to think hard about what their offering should be. And because of this customization, what do I want? What do I need? From the consumer, that cost consciousness, that sustainability, being top of mind. We might have, the SKU list getting bigger and bigger, larger and larger. So organizations will have to rethink about, their manufacturing models, their warehousing models, on how do we bring that agility, and even moving from one SKU to the other, if the consumer demand changes. So how do we build that agility within our processes so that we can adjust to that SKU complexity and are also ready to, react to that SKU complexity.
Thank you, Apul. I agree with you that yes, it's a time for all organizations to look at moving from industry to industry, that how has the demand been, which SKUs have had a higher demand and which are more important. And again, based on the consumer demand and their expectations, how the SKUs can be well defined, and the capital engagement, obviously, it goes into the capital engagement of organizations. And again, one more topic, like from the same thing which we discussed earlier, the supplier relationship as well, that how quickly our value partners or our downstream and upstream partners can react to this new norm or the new conditioning of the consumers. Again, moving on, you mentioned, Toby, the automated fridge that are available that they can order. So this again linking to the e-commerce and everything. So a lot of work has been done in the digitization scope of supply chain, where may it be the logistics, the procurement, the warehouses, on the automations and everything. So how big is the future? That now, do you think that this would be taken on a very serious note across the board in all industries, that they have learned the importance of the digitization and the automation scope throughout the supply chain and the value chain? So your input on the future of this.
I think it's a bit ironical almost. I think if you look at logistics in total, you're talking about a $10 trillion a year industry. It's huge. So it's 10,000 billion dollars, right? And there was a lot of money was in startups working on logistics. I think SoftBank, for example, one of the biggest private investors out there, had financed a lot of the companies. And if anything, COVID actually slowed down all these investment from external sources into digitalizing the logistics. At the same time, everybody working on logistics knows it's an absolute necessity, and it's an absolute, it will be a key trend for the next 10 years, and it will change the industry. And why is that? Because, as I said at the beginning, there's so many moving parts, so many parties, so many, the cargo, the assets playing together, and the inefficiencies in the systems are still huge. I can give you a simple example. I mean, if you talk about trucking, in Europe, you have 15-minute windows to deliver or to pick up cargo. If you come to UAE, you typically talk about a day, 1 day loading, 1 day unloading, and 2, 3, 4 days you are moving the cargo. If you go to Africa, if you go to ports, you will see trucks waiting for a week or two to pick up a container. And it's not efficient that you wait 2 weeks. And you still have, in many developing markets, you have these bazaars or marketplaces where truck drivers are sitting and waiting for 2 weeks for a broker to give them a load. And I think if we can cut out all these inefficiencies, that the trucks which are there and the drivers which are there and ready to drive are deployed, bringing cargo from A to B, it will be good for everyone in the system. It will be good for the shippers. It will reduce the cost. It will reduce the cost for the end consumers in the supermarket. If you look, I mean, again, Africa as an example, but typically the proportion of logistic costs in a product in a supermarket in Africa can be up to 5 times higher than in the US or in Europe. And for me, that is crazy. And that just demonstrates how inefficient the whole systems are, and how many things we could really already address by having the right people with the right assets at the right place, doing the right thing, and really linking everything together. And I mean, still today, you experience that a ship arrived at the port, and everybody seems to be surprised that this ship suddenly appeared, and that ship normally was sailing for weeks. And Youssef is smiling, right? And it's like, I mean,
I've seen it all, buddy.
Yeah, there is a lot of scope for becoming better. I think we have made good steps in the last years. But I want to see the logistic professional who doesn't see much scope for improvement. I cannot believe it. I cannot, the potential is huge.
Thank you, Toby. It's an interesting input that you told us, that the investments have kind of slowed down, and hope that this reverses very soon with the lockdowns ending, the investments, the lockdown on the investment also end, inshallah.
No, I think
Abul,
just to clarify,
yes,
I think it's the external investments, right? I think the logistic companies, my feeling is logistic companies have increased their own investments. But if you look at market and official funding into new startups, that has come down because people have become more careful.
Okay, thank you. Abul, your take on this, on the digitization of supply chain.
Yeah, so I think you spoke about two things, digitization and automation, right? So I'll kind of address them separately. And because, Toby's spoken a bit about digitization, I'll start with automation. Now, before COVID, when organizations looked at automation, it was looked at from a financial lens on what's the return on investment, where labor was expensive, it made sense. Let's do automation. I mean, there are other, I'm simplifying the discussion. There are much other benefits and pros and cons of automation, but just, from a COVID perspective, it was a financial lens. Now, what we've realized in this, in COVID is, well, people are actually the carrier of these viruses, right? And a lot of manufacturing processes, warehousing processes had to slow down where we didn't have the space to ensure social distancing between people. So less people, so processes did slow down. So the lens that COVID has added to automation is the business continuity lens. And that's a very important lens. So moving forward, as organizations will look at automation, in addition to the financial benefits, business continuity will become a key factor. So the balance would be, do I design a bigger space, dollar per meter square, to ensure that I have enough space for social distancing, or do I go down the automation route? What makes more sense? So I do foresee automation being adapted more and more. It does add that complexity on, if you automate a process, then sometimes your ability to handle SKU complexity also goes down, or, so automation will have to, change a lot. So, but my feel on this is that you would see more and more automation coming in. On digitization, I'll just, talk, and I think I spoke about it earlier, where during the pandemic, we've realized up and down the value chain, it's very important for everyone to be connected, to make real-time decisions, right? And people have realized the benefit of it. That's one of the reasons where people will understand why digitization is so important, that ability to see data real time so that you can make the right decisions. What do I need to order? What do I need to make? What do I need to ship? Where is it? Is it still 200 kilometers away, 100 kilometers away? I don't know, right? So the more you have this data, the easier it is for you to make those decisions. So real-time data digitization will be something that will be adopted a lot moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Abul, for your input on both the digitization and automation. Yusuf, if you may, please.
Thank you. To continue on what Abdul was saying about automation, yes, for sure, the drive will be towards increased automations in not only in warehouses, wherever possible, for sure. But the problem is, see, I do agree that historically the decision to automate or not to automate has always been down to the ROI, the cost per unit, and it's just that just up until recently, the offerings, what the market had to offer in terms of an automated solution, in terms of CapEx cost, versus a semi-automated solution that delivered similar throughput, but involved a higher number of human capital. You were talking about 6 to 7 multiples of CapEx. Yes, companies want to worry about their continuity, but at a certain scale or below a certain scale, automation is just simply unattainable. The cost will definitely outweigh the benefit. And this is where organizations should start looking at ways to be part of a larger scale. That is automated, that scores high on a resilience index. And that's where they would be able to benefit from the business continuity opportunities that automation can give them. If they are unable to be at that scale by themselves, they should look at alliances, they should look at outsourcing, they should look at co-investments, they should look at vertical integration. At the end of the day, you have to place yourself within that operation of a scale that delivers continuity based on automation, yet doesn't really bite you hard in terms of your handling and storage cost per unit. As far as digitization, I totally agree with Toby. It's a no-brainer. If you don't have a clear digital strategy operating partially or wholly under a digitized platform, you're too late. You need to get your act together. Otherwise, before you know it, you'll be out of business no matter what you're doing and no matter what size you're doing it at. I understand the concept of digitization, just like everything else. And a few years ago, it was quite a massive undertaking in terms of CapEx and systems and software, and a lot of companies had to grow their organization just to be able to comply with the, with simple compliance measure in segregation of duties when implementing large ERP systems. All right, but at the end of the day, but today the offering is very different. There is absolutely no excuse, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, and no matter what size. There are cloud-based applications out there that can deliver your entire transaction and database into a digitized form. And they come at relatively very low costs. So if you're not in it, it's about time you did.
Thank you, Yusuf. I think for all our viewers who are watching us and listening in, the take from all of this is that you need to go back, irrespective where you are in the middle management, top management, but start looking at your operations from both the perspectives, that is digitization, that how effective you can make your whole value chain, and on the automation part, that the factor, as Abul mentioned, that previously we were looking at the per square meter cost or per pallet cost, how much it is costing. But now the new factor has come in that from a pandemic point of view, that the pro of this whole automation is that the impact of human interaction, how can it be reduced so that the continuation of the supply chain, or at least the receiving and the distribution part of the whole supply chain keeps intact. And we did see a lot of disruption happening because of supplies, even with the e-commerce structure, that a lot of companies were not able to fulfill the consumer demand. There were delays of 3 to 4 weeks minimum in with the online ordering as well. So this is a strong take from this session. Now we have talked a lot on the e-commerce and the logistics portion of it. I would like to now come towards the procurement aspect of the supply chain, and this is a topic that I really enjoy. My question next is that there has always been a school of thought on the two topics, that single sourcing versus multi-source, and local and global sourcing. I would like our esteemed panelists to tackle both of them separately. First, the single sourcing versus the multi-sourcing, and then the pros and cons of local versus global sourcing. So I would put this to Abul first. That how do you see it? That do you think that putting all your eggs in one basket, based on the experience that we learned from COVID, or should we, have strong partnership with multiple partners and engage with all of them? And because of the disruption in the logistics and in the global supply chain, that we should also now enhance our local sourcing wherever it is possible. Abul, your take.
Yeah, so I think there's no universal answer to it, and what we might say today, it might be different tomorrow, right? So, but from a COVID perspective, on the local versus global, see, if you look at, let me try to simplify the discussion. If you look at from a government policy perspective, now, because governments are also suffering due to COVID, so there's a lot of incentive to do things locally. We're looking at across different countries, tax breaks in terms of setting up local investments so that employment can be generated, GDP moves up a bit. So the government policies in a lot of countries, especially developing countries, will give incentive to more and more local investment. And putting up tax structures which might discourage imports and loss of critical dollar. So in developing countries, you might see this trend. Now, if that happens, which basically means that you would see a lot of local options available in terms of sourcing. The other thing is, in COVID, what we've also realized is the closer the source is to you, the better it is, because different countries were on a different trajectory when we talk about COVID. So when Pakistan is closing down, Europe's opening up. Europe's closing down, I don't know, the Saudis now on a different trajectory, right? So China's moving on a different trajectory. So what we've also realized is, if I'm buying as close to me as possible, well, the shocks or the timing of those shocks are the same for me. So the other, so because of government policies and because of this learning from COVID, I think there might be more incentive to go local versus global as we move forward. However, there's a different angle to it, but I think I'm going to just contain the discussion because that's what my feeling on this is. On the single versus multiple sourcing, purely from a COVID perspective, what it does depend on whether what you're trying to buy is a patented item. So iPhone would, they would just do their manufacturing at one place because there's a lot of patents and or at as less places as possible because there's a lot of patents involved. But depending on what kind of material that you're procuring, from the learning from COVID is, the more options you have, the better protected you were. And you didn't have to build that cost within your own organization. So you don't have to build those huge inventories, because if you had more partners, you could share that burden with them. If you had more suppliers and stuff, you could share that burden with him. And the impact, the shock to your organization was much less. So this was a learning multiple sourcing does have. However, moving forward, we've spoken about some of the trends post-COVID. We will need a lot of partnership with our suppliers for innovation, for productivity, for demand surges, to invest in capacity and the SKU complexity, which now, so that single versus multiple sourcing, I don't have a definite answer for it because there's pros and cons to both. Moving forward, it might be better to partner with some suppliers if you want to have, that investment in the business. But at the same time, COVID has also taught us something different. So I'm still split on this, on what would happen. I don't think I have a definite answer, but I would love to hear from the rest of the participants to make up my mind on this.
Thank you, Abul. This is the very reason that this question I have put forward, because this is a kind of a gray area. This side is also okay, this side, or how we can balance between the two extremes of the procurement strategy. So Yusuf, up to you. How would you see it, or what would you give advice on this topic?
Thank you. I would absolutely build on what Abdul was saying. With one difference in the point of view that localization, not every country can achieve. At the end of the day, if you take what is today a globalized model of supply, and you want to break it down into smaller, independent, not so co-disruptive kind of clusters, doing it at the level of a country is probably going to be challenging for the majority of the countries in the world. So the answer is somewhere in the middle. You don't globalize for sure, all right, but you regionalize. So, but it all has to do at the end of the day on the bigger scheme of things, and how how the alignment of the geopolitical map today is. But at the end of the day, every business will have to start looking at dividing its entire supply chain into clusters that serve regions that are connected together through different modes of transport, where if you have disruption in one, you have others that you can rely on. And that is going to kind of absorb greatly the impact that it would have on supply chains and loss of economies of scale that are today supported by the globalized model. But again, in terms of sourcing, on whether you source, single or plural, as they say, again, I totally agree. It all depends on the product that you're procuring. I mean, and the example that was put forward in terms of an iPhone, of course, you will have to buy an iPhone from a single manufacturing plant in China. But at the end of the day, if the iPhone supply chain is supposed to survive, then that single manufacturing site will probably need to be broken down into multiple manufacturing sites, each to serve a certain cluster of countries, or what we can call a region. And then each one of these clusters will independently source for its raw materials and maintain a higher percentage of regional sourcing opposed to international sourcing, to be able to maintain the capability within the region, and hence be able to respond to shocks that, as Abdul say, will be common within that same region.
Thank you, Yusuf, for your input. Agree with every point. Yes. And I like your concept of the regional sourcing rather than the midway, rather than the local versus the global, the regional. And that also gel in well with what Abul was saying, that to bring your sources as close as possible so that the impact are similar, so that the environment and the parameters are similar to your organization or to your demographics. Toby, your input on the same.
Yeah, so I mean, if we first look at local versus global, I would say, I think sometimes people overestimate today the level of globalization versus regionalization, because I think a lot of trade actually happens within regional clusters today. So if you think of Germany and trade, they trade mainly with European countries and neighbors. Yes, they have significant trade with China, but it's not like it is the majority or close to the majority. So I think sometimes people overestimate a bit the globalization. And actually, the globalization still has potential to further continue and grow. And I personally believe it's actually a good thing, because what did it do? It helped us achieve economies of scale, like Yusuf just mentioned. And for example, helped many people to have access to a smartphone and have access to the internet, which otherwise would never have had the opportunity to get connected. So there is a big benefit in the huge economies of scale. Many things have become affordable for many people on the planet in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And that is really something people shouldn't forget. And I think also, thinking of globalization, there's the saying, I think, if you send goods, you don't send soldiers. So it also helps, having peace on the planet. People who do business together, they don't fight. And that's also a very good side effect of trade, in my view. So I think, yes, there will be considerations from governments about strategic resources, medical, PPE, what we've learned. In the bigger economy think, you're talking about a small proportion of GDP. So I don't think it will be the overwhelming portion. Yeah, I think thinking of Abdul and water is a strategic resource, right? Having access to drinking water for the population in crisis times, that will be a consideration. Now, talking of single and multiple sourcing, yeah, I mean, the colleagues have really made the point. It all depends. Yeah, it really depends on the product, your strategic rationale. In some cases, you don't want to put all your eggs into one basket, like we say. But if I need a software, there's no point having two softwares. You just need one software. The one dimension I would perhaps add to the spectrum is, and I think that was also mentioned before by Abdul already, is doing it in-house. So it could be a consideration in future to say, do I source it from one source? Do I source it from multiple sources? Or do I do it myself? An example coming to my mind is there's a big Californian car manufacturer starting with e-cars, and he's building a big factory in Germany as we speak. And he's also manufacturing the batteries. And it's a strategic decision, I think, for him to be in control, whereas the German competition is not even really thinking about it. They will consider it as a part to procure. And I think that's something which will be a new dimension. Do I do it myself again? is it strategically an important strategic capability I need to build in-house? Do I go for single source because of effectiveness, cost effectiveness, yet keeping in mind, is the supplier only depending on my business? And if my business collapses, is he then dead, or is he diversified enough in his portfolio himself? Is it a sustainable model? And do I have my rights protected, or do I go with multiple sources? How many, what is the inefficiencies? What is potentially the price premium I pay for the flexibility? Those will be the considerations in my point of view. But it will be always depending on the circumstances and the strategic rationale of each enterprise.
Thank you, Toby. So basically, at the end of the day, it's again, we have to look this topic from a strategic perspective, and obviously, as Toby also mentioned, and everyone else, that we need to understand that, are we actually looking at the sourcing from, is it truly a global sourcing, or actually we are terming the regional sourcing as global? So bringing whatever can be possible closer by, it can be a better option. And but still, you know, there are certain areas where you cannot change your, for example, sourcing from China or from Vietnam or these countries, or from even Africa. So again, it has to be a smart decision, or smart mix of how you are going to be between the two extremes of the local and local and global, and multi and single sourcing. Moving forward, now I would like to touch the topic on an overall supply chain, that the last 4 months of COVID and the lockdowns tested the capabilities of the global supply chain. What key lessons were learned, and what future steps should be taken to make the supply chains more agile, adaptive, and responsive? Or in other words, what steps should be taken to make the supply chain more resilient to such scenarios? So Yusuf, if you may, your thoughts on it.
I believe regionalization is the starting point. I believe businesses have to seriously look at their sourcing strategies and make some very hard choices in terms of accepting potentially a higher cost per unit to be able to at least bring the supply a little bit closer to them and have supply be more reactive to their demand. Organizations will also need to capitalize on technology with this disruption. There's so much technology out there that answer many areas of need for businesses. Trust in technology and believe that the technology at the end of the day is the ultimate disruptor of supply chains today.
Thank you, Yusuf. Toby, to you now.
Yeah, I think many things we discussed before. So digitalization, technology, like Yusuf mentioned, will be key enablers. I think business continuity planning has become a big priority. I think we luckily always did it, but I know some companies, I guess, went through a learning experience, and I think we had a big life case from where we have all learned. I think one thing I would really say is also investment in people, having a flexible mindset, having the agility, also being able and willing to use technology, because that sometimes in our industry still is a challenge, that people are not technology savvy enough or technology open-minded enough, I would say. But those will be the key ingredients in my point of view. And I would really say, I mean, you know, everything aside, overall logistic people are execution focused, and they have always been flexible. They are flexible, and I think they have proven it in the last half year. So I think it's already, for me, pretty clear that we have a lot of highly skilled professionals working in this industry. That's what kept all the supply chains running through all the difficult times.
Okay, thank you, Toby. Abul?
Yes. Yeah. So I think you know, we've throughout the discussion we've been talking about a lot of this. So I don't want to repeat what we've already discussed, but I think building on what Toby was saying, it's just amazing on how some organizations are thriving even during COVID times. You look at the results that are being published for Q2, there are some organizations which have done really well. And it just shows that organizations and people in supply chains that have shown the resiliency, that have looked at what opportunities out there, how that consumer demand is shifting, how do we make sure that we capitalize on it, are the ones that have gained. So yes, showing resilience is key. Adaptability is key. From a manufacturing perspective, I think moving forward, we've spoken about this from an automation perspective, will look at it from a business continuity angle also, and you'll see this more and more being adapted. The other thing is, I think from a facility design perspective, we might see facilities being designed to adapt to social distancing. So while, because real estate was expensive, so one of the trends that we saw was things were getting smaller and smaller. How do we, make sure that we can fit as much as possible in the, so dollar per meter square, what's the cost that I'm putting in? I think that trend might change. And when we're designing facilities from a manufacturing perspective, we would be thinking at, if not automation, then how do I make sure there's enough space to keep my processes running at optimum speed while making sure that people can be accommodated with that social distancing. So that's something that would be the regionalization. We've already spoken about the upward integration, looking at those opportunities. We've also spoken about digitization and all of that we've already spoken about. But showing agility, showing resilience, I mean, that's the key to surviving and thriving, in these times. And it will be it'll be something, that we will need to continue to do.
Thank you, Abul. Now, we are coming to the end of our session, and once the next question will be the last one. Once we are done with that, we have, mashallah, quite a few number of questions from our viewers. So the question I will put up, one panelist would answer each question, so it would not go through all the three. So I'll put it up to one at a time. Last question from my side is to wrap up this session, and this is something that is close to a lot of people at heart, that as leaders in the industry, in the supply chain field, in the past 4 months and even now, we are seeing that there's an immense pressure on both cost and headcount across the industries and supply chain. So in this scenario, what advice would you give to professionals in general, and also what advice would you give to the new entrants in the job market, and especially the unfortunate people who kind of lost their jobs during this pandemic? So your take, Toby, if you may, please.
Thank you very much, Norman. So from my point of view, I mean, as I said before, I think if I think of logistics professionals, I think of people who, get things done. And I think that is, and I was reading quite some articles about it, that many, smart people, much smarter than me, believe that future CEOs in the next 10, 20, 30 years might many come from logistics backgrounds, because they really are connected in the world, they have seen the world, and they know how to get things done. The advice I would have to people would really be open-minded, embrace technology, try to learn. One thing is for sure, I think the typical clerk type of job, processing the paperwork, processing the paper bills, preparing shipments, that these jobs are at risk of automation. Sooner or later, software will take over a lot of that work. However, we still need a lot of people who understand the flows, who understand what is happening, who can connect with the customers, can connect with the shippers. So I believe there is a lot of opportunity for those who are, open to explore the world, who are open to relocate, and who are able and willing to understand and use technology. I think there is a lot of opportunity. And yeah, if you're in an unfortunate situation at the moment that you lost your job, use the time. There is so much, and you mentioned it yourself, there's so much opportunity out there to do online courses, to go on YouTube, try to become smarter and learn, and just sitting around at home will not get you closer to your next job. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Toby. Very valid advice, that make the best use of your time, that take it from a positive angle, that don't be bogged down by it, but try to maximize the use of the time that has been provided to you. Abul, your take on it?
Yeah. So, I know, we're going through a tough time, and there are a lot of people who have lost jobs, or, it's not an easy time. But what we need to keep our eyes on is that, listen, there will be a vaccine. We will move beyond it. And the number of opportunities that we've seen, how people have, found opportunities to get to the consumer in different ways, different product offerings, or, the post-COVID, the economy is going to bounce back. Everyone's positive about it. There are so many opportunities that people are looking forward to. So there will be lots and lots of opportunities, and it's there is light at the end of the tunnel. Absolutely. Now the question is, how do we make sure that we can tap into those opportunities, right? Now, a couple of things over there. Now we need to understand and realize what kind of skills are going to be in demand as we move forward, right? In my point of view, the subject matter expert skills, we would still have a need for it, but there's not going to be a lot of value for it, because with automation, with digitization, a lot of stuff, which required people who knew how to do the job, get the job done, could be automated, right? But the skills of resiliency, leadership skills, being a generalist, would be more important as we move on, right? So do not underemphasize these skills. Understand you need to be digitally savvy. You need to make sure you're agile. You need to make sure you've got a learning mindset. How do you learn, unlearn? How do you move on? How do you adapt to change? These are extremely important skills as we move forward. There will be a lot of opportunities. We just need to make sure that people who've lost their job, look out for anything. If it's a temporary internship, if it's something that you can do for free, because it would give you the exposure and build your network. Because once those opportunities come, if you've made sure you're investing in yourself, if you've had the exposure, if you build that network, more people, you will have access to those opportunities. So don't give up. There's great time, ahead of us. Just make sure we're ready for it, and we're ready for those opportunities. I think we lost Noman.
I think we lost Noman.
Thank you, Abul. Yusuf, from you.
Well, in line with what the gentleman has said.
Thank you.
Differentiate yourself. Find your talent. Invest in technology. Trust in technology. And no matter where the job demand is today, people have to understand that they don't have to go through 4 years of college to be called proficient enough and be able to actually take these jobs. The skills that are in demand globally today, for example, artificial intelligence or machine learning domains, there are courses out there that certify you as a professional, and you would be able to fulfill part of that demand for such jobs. Just keep on differentiating yourself. For everyone out there who has extensive supply chain experience, I want them to know that in my book, their supply chain experience prepares them for anything they are looking on taking on in the future, because we've seen it all. We've served, we've been served, and we've been placed in the middle so many times and managed to get ourselves out of it. We love facts, we love numbers, we don't live on promises, and we're go-getters and we deliver. That's a good recipe for me. If I am employing, that's definitely what I'm looking for in a person.
Thank you, Yusuf. I think regarding this topic, our discussion is coming to an end. It was a very fruitful and enjoyable discussion. I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot from all three of you. Now we have quite a number of questions. I think around 10 so far, and from various locations. So I can see one question even coming from Tanzania. So that is good. So I'll start off with the first question. This is from Namarig Hasan from Dubai. I don't know if Namarig is a lady name or a gentleman's name, but a new graduate from University of Sharjah. So a fresh entrant to the market. So we wish best of luck to them. The question is, for again, continuing with what we were discussing right now, for starting a career in supply chain, what is the best option or role to start working in, taking in consideration the effect of COVID-19? Abul, if you can take this question.
I think I mean, it's a very personal question, because saying what's the best role is difficult, because supply chain is such a vast function. You start off from procurement to planning to manufacturing, quality, logistics. What I would suggest is it's important to have an idea of where your interest is. What part of supply chain is something that gives you that kick. Early on in your career, is also important to get overall exposure of different facets of supply chain, so that as you progress in your career, you've got an understanding of overall supply chain and you're ready for leadership roles. So what I would suggest is to make sure that you get early on in your career as breadth as possible of experience within supply chain across different functions in supply chain, starting from procurement, strategy, planning, manufacturing, quality, logistics, so that you're ready for those bigger roles as you move on in your career.
Thank you, Abul, for handling the question. The next question is from Mahdi Rushdi. He is a logistics supervisor with Landmark Group in Saudi. He is from Sri Lanka. So he has two questions. So the first question is, please clarify future supply chain opportunities. Which roles would be good for the future? Toby, if you may, please, if you can handle the first question.
I think it's a bit related to what Abdul just said. So I think it's hard to say supply chain is a big thing. What I would personally think at the moment, most probably e-commerce sector is offering, I guess, the most opportunity. I would say the more classical big corporate supply chains, companies are still careful. Why are they careful in hiring? Because they want to protect their existing employees. So in e-commerce, with all the growth, there is a lot of demand, and as we said, I believe it's a big, big sector with a lot of potential. So I think if you get involved there early, that can be of help, and that would be, yeah, I would keep my eyes and ears open at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. The next question that Mahdi asked is that which supply chain study, I think he means is course, which supply chain course would be in good demand after COVID-19? So taking from what Toby was saying, Yusuf, if you may handle this question, that where do you think the course post-COVID?
Now that depends where you are in terms of your career in supply chain and how much you already have under your belt. But at the end of the day, it's always recommended that you would start your certification journey with achieving something that is general within the overall concept of the fundamentals and the definitions of supply chain. Throughout my career, I have had difficulty with people who have been people who have been in the field for quite a while to be able to share a common terminology. So I would definitely recommend anyone to get certified in something that basically gives an overall view of what supply chain is and the key definitions. And then you want to start looking at what kind of specialization that you want to go into. Yes, supply chain is a vast discipline, as the gentlemen have said. If you would ask me today which one would be in demand within the near to medium term future, I would definitely say any discipline related to e-com. I totally agree with Toby. But I would also, for more classical supply chains, I would say demand management. I think that is that part in supply chain where the science that we've been following for the past 30 years has been seriously shook by the pandemic. So yeah, I would say demand right now, well, within the near future, should be the hot topic: demand management.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. We have a specific question for Abul. The viewer name is Mohammed Sajjad. I believe he's from Pakistan. His question is directed to Abul. What new skills acquired? What new skills acquired and managed team in during COVID situations?
Sorry, Naman, could you repeat that? I didn't get it.
The question is, what new skills are, he's written, what new skills acquired and managed team in during COVID situation? I think he means what new skills need to be acquired to manage team in during COVID situation.
Okay, no, that's a good question. I think with COVID, as we move towards more and more of work from home, one, as a leader, it's very important to make sure that you continue to show empathy and you understand that it's an adjustment for everyone. I hope I got the question right. So what I understood was, in terms of managing people, what are the skills?
Yes.
So it's a lot about, so you have to continue to show that empathy. People are struggling with this change. They have fears. They have people sick in their family. They're adjusting to this change, working from home. So showing empathy is extremely, extremely important. Now, communication is now even more important than ever. Making sure that you're helping your team understand on how the landscape within your organization is changing, how the priorities are changing, how everyone needs to adjust to make sure that they're playing a part in terms of delivering those changing priorities. So communication becomes extremely important. Showing empathy becomes extremely important. Flexibility, because working from home, everyone might want to work on different hours. So the focus needs to be, we need to get the job done, and not I need to manage people hour by hour, or how many hours someone has worked. It's about getting that job done. So showing flexibility, empathy, communication. These are some of the things that are extremely important in managing people during this pandemic.
Thank you, Abul. We have one comment. It's not a question, it's a comment from Ms. Amina Khalid she's with McDonald's, Pakistan. Her comment is, your winning bet would be customer centric. So anything we do will be assessed on a whole new level now. Empathy and emotional intelligence would be the name of the game. Thank you, Amna, for your well put comment. And personally, I agree with you that customer centric and understanding what our customers are needing, and the emotional intelligence, especially in these trying times, how well we are able to understand the impact of our decision on an emotional level as well, is definitely a key. So thank you, Amna, for your input. Next question I will put to Toby. It is from Tanzania. As you are well equipped with the African market, so this question is more apt for you. The question has been put forward by one Mr. Amin Dharsi. He's from the hospital or the healthcare segment. The question is, what is the impact on future of supply chain for healthcare, especially with COVID pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, so for healthcare, I think that it was absolutely a key, key focus in the last couple of months to first get PPE and get medications from A to B. For us, it meant also a lot of looking at facilities, the cold chains. You have certain standards you need to maintain to get medicines done. I think in the medical field, there will also be a lot of thinking of perhaps having more localized, regionalized, back to what Yusuf said, distribution hubs. Interestingly enough, in Tanzania, we had, I think a year or two ago, a project with a drone. So we were flying medication from, say, Dar es Salaam to the remote areas when people had an emergency. So if there was an emergency in the hospital and they needed a medicine within, minutes or hours, we were flying that with drones, and we could save lives, because if the medicine is, too long on the way, then the patient unfortunately passes away. So I think there will be a lot of opportunity there, and I think COVID just, that everybody's now getting prepared for the time when vaccination will be available. When that will be the case, then we will have to distribute that very quickly to really get over it. And once that is done, we'll have to think about concepts of how we can structurally organize it. And I really hope that digitalization and new tools will give everybody on the planet access to affordable and highly needed medication. So whether you are sitting in Dar es Salaam, whether you are sitting, at a very far village somewhere in the hinterland, you should have the chance to get the medical treatment you need. And that there is today still too many gaps in my point of view.
So true. Thank you, Toby. The next question is from our friend Yusuf, and I know him very well, Sajjad Samiuddin.
Oh, Sajjad, yes. So nice to hear from you.
Exactly. So, Sajjad, he was, let me introduce Sajjad. He was part of Yusuf's team in Tamar. Then he moved back to
allow
India,
me to introduce Sajjad. Allow me to introduce Sajjad. Sajjad is a pillar when it came to the buildup of the entire supply chain function in the pharmaceutical division at Namarig. I was fortunate to work with Sajjad for quite a number of years, and I know him on a personal level, and I wish him all the best.
Perfect. Yes, he's a gem of a person, Sajjad. So Sajjad has put forward this question, so I will direct it to Yusuf. How is the forecast demand challenging as compared to previous and current situation?
Okay, this is a big topic, but at the end of the day, what happened today is, as I said, demand models, everything that we've been doing with demand, looking at history, looking at trends, looking at troughs, looking at peaks, seasonalities, everything now is different. Today, the job of a demand planner, I'm not saying that they should completely disregard history, but what I'm saying is that they should disregard history and revert to zero-based forecasting. Zero-based forecasting today is what would differentiate the importance of the human element in our supply chain. All of these solutions that we've talked about in terms of elevating the resilience of supply chains, from a view of an outsider, they look as if we were trying to replace man with machine. But in reality, what the pandemic, what this disruption has showed us, is that no matter what systems you had in place, and no matter how far advanced you were in terms of artificial intelligence and predictive technologies in terms of forecasting and demand management, well, guess what? None of it worked during 2020. And if it was only these organizations that put these systems and what kind of analytics they deliver to one side, and actually grabbed a piece of pen and a paper, a pen and a piece of paper, and started drafting down from zero based on how they sense demand is reacting to the pandemic within their area of operation. So I thank you, Sajjad, for this question. This is what I would advise everyone to look at right now. Go back to invest in demand sensing techniques rather than demand calculation techniques. You need to be closer to your market, closer to your customer, closer to your consumer. If there's a change and a trend, you need to be the first to pick it up. You need to be the first to process it, and you need to be the first to communicate it upstream within the value chain, so you achieve the alignment and the reaction that will answer the change in demand patterns.
So true. I agree with you, Yusuf, that the closer you are to the market or to the consumer, your ears need to be right there, open, and listening to the activities happening. So not just depending on the numbers or the historical trend, you should be able to predict what is about to come, and that makes a sound and well-defined demand forecasting. Uh,
Hmm.
the next two questions are also from colleagues from Tamil. So the next question I would put to Abul. The question is from Nader Hawas from Tamar in Saudi Arabia. Do you expect a global change in supply chain distribution power to be reallocated from relying and depending on current certain market industrial site location to move it somewhere else after COVID-19 to avoid monopolization and dependency? When and how? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Absolutely, because there was a lot of things in that question. Yeah,
Exactly.
a good question, but yeah, a lot of things.
Exactly. Thank you, Nader. It's a well thought of question. So the question again, do you expect a global change in supply chain distribution power to be reallocated from relying and depending on current certain market industrial site locations to move it to somewhere else after COVID-19? So they are talking about the movement or
Yeah,
the power
yeah.
reallocation.
So
And
I think,
the next portion of the next portion of the question is to avoid monopolization and dependency. When and how should be this should be done?
yeah. So I think in some of the questions that you asked, we discussed some of the themes, the impact of COVID, when we were talking about local, regional, and global. Uh, from a let's start from a supply perspective. Now, COVID has taught us that the closer a source is to you, the better you are protected from the shocks of it. So, and we spoke about government incentives in terms of creating local employment and taxation on imports. So a lot of that would drive regional or country investment. So you might start seeing, as we recover from COVID, that changing dynamics. China might not, I'm talking from Pakistan's perspective, China might not be the cheapest source for raw materials if government puts in taxation on those imports and gives incentive to local economy for making that investment. But as Yusuf had pointed out, there's also an extent to it, or not everything can be regionalized or localized. And there's so many, but you might start seeing some of that movement, which would be driven a lot by government policies. On the moving that monopoly, that's tricky. So I think, again, I tackle it from that local versus multiple sourcing perspective. As we move on, recover from COVID, we would need a strong partnership up and down our value chain. When I say down, we'll have to be very close to our consumer on what's happening. When I say up, we would have to partner to make sure that demand changes are timely cascaded up the value chain. So from a supplier perspective, making sure that they're adapting to those changes, delivering on the productivity or the innovation challenges. So we might see, again, it would depend what we might see in organizations partnering more, to deliver on that, and even doing things themselves. That it's a contradiction. If you do it yourself, you're breaking that monopoly. But if you're partnering to make sure that the whole supply chain is more. So again, I don't think we have enough insights at this point on definitely what would happen, but certainly I would see more regionalization and localization in terms of geographical shift.
Thank you, Abul. Thank you for your answer to that. And I would now move to the last question, and I would direct this question to Toby. This question is again from Tamir. It's from another good friend of mine, and also from Yusuf's team, Nasir Sheikh from Jeddah. What he is asking is that there is no demand pattern in COVID. It was difficult to understand the market need how to build your future demand post-COVID. So again, this is something that Yusuf did cover while answering the question of Sayyid Samiuddin, but Toby, if you may also give your 2 cents on this, please.
I think that's the $1 billion question, right? If you would know what people want to have in future, then you can prepare and do. I think in the end of the day, it's like Yusuf already explained, the interesting piece is there machine learning AI is limited because there's not like a previous case we can really use to learn from patterns. At the end of the day, it's about observing, keeping your eyes and ears open, following news, following different pieces. I think Steve Jobs held a famous speech about connecting the dots. If you see something here and there and here, and perhaps you can make some sense out of it. Talking to the people, listening to feedback is also very, very important. Speaking to your friends, your colleagues, your family, you will hear, they will discuss new trends coming up. So it's really like keeping your eyes and ears open, you're trying to understand what is happening around you in all the different dimensions and channels. And yeah, if you figure it out, that's really the big $1 billion award you can win.
Perfect. One last question, if you guys allow me, I would put it forward. So what the last question, it just came in and I'm putting it forward because it's a very relevant, a very up-to-date question, particularly to the new sanctions and the new thing which is happening between the USA and the China. The question is from Leslie from Kenya. Do you see a shift in supply chain, especially with these sanctions between China and USA? So it's an open question. Whoever would like to tackle it. So Yusuf, if you would like to.
I can please say something. I mean, for sure, there has been certain shifts of trades. If you look at the Vietnam trade statistics, for example, exports to the US have increased significantly. I'm not sure how much Chinese products were trucked to Vietnam and then flown out, or whether that was really produced in Vietnam. That's beyond my knowledge. But there is for sure an up and down, and you have also seen before the tariffs were imposed that trade went up, and then the tariff came and it went down based on the different classifications of goods. So there will be ongoing discussions, and on top of COVID, the whole political situation we have with the US, China, other countries imposing tariffs and complicating trades, it will have an impact on trade flows. I think that's for sure.
Perfect.
If I may, I believe.
Please, yes, sir.
Thank you. There is a broader, let's say, understanding of what the word risk means today. And there's also a broader understanding on what organizations are willing to spend to mitigate against such risks. Let me just give you a quick example. Today, 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients that flow into European pharmaceutical manufacturing come from the Indian subcontinent. Now, this is something the European Union at one point in time will have to stop and ask themselves: is it sustainable? India being a far region geographically would not be under the same disruptions that Europe would be under. India falls right in the middle of a completely different geopolitical map than what the European market is all about in the first place. But at one point in time, the European Union will have to drive the production of APIs from being so dependent on one source of a nation and try to bring it as close as possible to the EU, if not within the EU itself. Does that increase costs? Potentially, yes. But does it improve sustainability and resilience? For sure. Does it make the European Union far more or far less susceptible to disruption, specifically when you're talking about something as important as its pharma strategic inventory? For sure, this is something that they will need to look at. Now, whether they decide to go 100% within their own demography, or try at least to select a few of the very key products that they would want to bring into, closer to the EU and absorb that incremental cost. Whatever that degree of shift is, yes, there will be a shift. The take home is nothing is the same. Nothing. At the level of an organization, at the level of a country, at the level of a region, at the level of every economic cluster there is in the world, nothing is going to be the same.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you all of you for a very interactive and a very knowledgeable session. I thank you again for taking the time out and joining me in this talk. Toby, thank you, and I wish you the best of holidays in Germany. And Yusuf, I wish you the best moving forward. I know you're just waiting for the flights to open from Saudi, and you need to move to Greece. So hopefully, I will be able to come and visit you.
Of course.
On your beach house and spend some good time with you.
Absolutely.
Fine. And Abul, you and I go a long way back to university. So I thank you again for joining me, and thank you again. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you. So this concludes our talk, and stay tuned. Hopefully, every month I'm planning to do more webinars. So I will be announcing that soon as well. So thank you again. Thank you, gentlemen. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.